I don't know about you, but sometimes I just feel like I am so rushed and so busy and torn in so many different directions, and like there are so many issues that, I don't know, does it really make sense to set aside time to pray when there's more work to get done? Yet that's what God says is the plan. Or maybe you've noticed that other people seem to be getting ahead by putting others down, by cutting corners, by being deceitful. And yet you are called to go about your work with integrity and honesty. Can that really be the plan here? Yet if we're going to live God-centered lives, not self-centered lives, we're going to realize that his plan is greater than my plan because his power is greater than my power. That's going to be the third point that we see here this morning. Verse 15, on the seventh day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, with the priests sounding the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And then in verse 20, when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. The wall collapsed. Was it because of the shouting? Was it because of the marching? Was it because of the trumpet playing? Of course not. It was because of the power that God has to do the impossible. I think if you are like me, and at times you struggle with self-centeredness, I think we do well to remember this lesson to live a more God-centered life. What does that look like? Well, maybe when people congratulate you on a job well done, just reply, well, it's all to God's glory. And then when people criticize you for a job that they think was poorly done, you say, well, I'm not really in it for the approval of people. I'm in it to serve my God. And what matters isn't the opinion of others. What matters is the promises that God has made me. That I am loved, that I am redeemed, that I am forgiven. If you're someone who struggles with low self-esteem, take a moment to look outside of yourself and look at what God has already promised you and has already given you. He told Joshua, I have given you the city. He has told each and every one of you, I have given you the kingdom. He has done that for every believer of every generation. When the people of Israel rushed in and took the city, there was one house that they left alone. One family was spared, and that was the family that left a little scarlet cord in the window. Do you remember the story behind that? Before they had gotten close to Jericho, they sent 2 spies into the city. Now these spies, they maybe weren't as slick as they thought they were. Think about it. They had grown up in the wilderness. They spoke like they were from the wilderness. They smelled like they were from the wilderness. They weren't going to blend in very well with the city folk in Jericho. So almost immediately when they get there, word gets to the king that there are spies in the city. So the king sends officers to the house of Rahab to arrest the spies, but Rahab helps them escape. And there's a whole lot to get into with that story. It's a really neat thing that happens. That deserves its own sermon and really its own Bible study. It's really interesting. Rahab actually ends up being one of the 4 women that are mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. So it really is a fascinating thing that happens. But just one thing I want to remind you of that happens there, something that she says to the spies. She said, I have heard of your God. I have heard what your God can do. I have heard what your God has done. I have heard all about what happened at the Red Sea when God separated the waters and you crossed over on dry land. And because she heard about this powerful God, she knew that that God had to be the center of her life. Not the false idols and gods that her people had made up, that her people and her city were worshiping and exalting. No, this God needs to be the center of my life. Not even myself, not even should I make myself and my wants and needs and desires the center of my life. No, that powerful God needs to be at the center. And as we take a look at these miracles in the scriptures, this is week 2, we're going to look at 10 of them. As we look at these acts of a mighty God, these aren't just neat things that happened a long time ago. These stand as testaments to a mighty God who is worth your attention and who is worth being the center of your life. May God grant that for all of you. In his name, amen.